Attention, please. Kindly stand for the national anthem.
Sri Lanka Mata, Upper Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata. Sundara Siri Bharini, Surandi Ati Soma Lanka. Ranya Nalaya Nikamal Valaturu Vini Jaya Bhumiya Ramya. Apahata Sapa Siri Sita Sadhana, Jivanaye Mata. Viliganu Mena Apabhakti Puja, Namo Namo Mata. Upper Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata. Upavi Apavidya, Upamaya Apasatya, Upave Apashakti, Apahada Tulabhakti, Upalapa Aloke, Apane Anuprani, Upalapa Jivanave, Apamuktiya Upave, Navajivana Dimini, Nitila Apakubudu Karan Mata. Jnana Veeda Madhavani Naragena Yanu Mena Jaya Bhumikara. Ekamavatha Devaru Kalabalina, Yamu Yamu Vinopama. Prema Vada Samaveda Durala, Namo Namo Mata. Upper Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata.
Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all for today's CME on autoimmune inflammatory arthropathies, role of first contact medical personnel. I would like to invite Dr. Anand Pereira, President of Independent Medical Practitioner Association, to give the introduction note. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and the guest speaker. The CPD title for today is the autoimmune inflammatory arthropathies, role of first contact medical personnel, by Dr. Duminda Munidasa, MBBS Colombo, MD Medicine, consultant in rheumatology and rehabilitation. Currently the consultant in charge, the Rheumatology and Rehabilitation Hospital, Agama. Dear colleagues, while autoimmune inflammatory arthropathy probably seems to be an alien concept in our day-to-day clinical vocabulary, please note the byline added by the speaker, the role of first contact medical personnel. Now, this is extremely important as timely and appropriate referral is, I think, one of the main contributions we as first contact physicians can make. And of course, this is easier said than done. Because in this regard, I am sure our rheumatology expert will update us about all the new developments in early diagnosis. And of course, we should not forget the fact that these patients live in the same community as we live. The need for coordination of care and the continuity of care, of course, cannot be overemphasized. Dear sir, the podium is now open for you to update us and the audience on this valuable topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ananda Pereira, President, Independent Medical Practitioners Association, the council members and the members of the association. Thank you very much for the privilege given to me by inviting me to share a few thoughts on how you all can help the patients with autoimmune inflammatory arthropathies. And I wish to thank you for your invitation, as well as Dr. Monisha and the team from Novartis Marketing Extension of the Bowers for the facilitating this event. So, when we talk about autoimmune inflammatory arthropathies, it's mainly the rheumatoid arthritis, spondyloarthropathies are the main what we call autoimmune inflammatory arthropathies. And in the spondyloarthropathy, we have the axial spondyloarthropathy and the peripheral spondyloarthropathy. So I'll divide this into two sections today. One is on rheumatoid and peripheral spondyloarthropathy, and then next section on axial spondyloarthropathies, because they present in two different ways. The rheumatoid and peripheral spondyloarthropathy, as you all know, is mainly presenting as peripheral, mainly the hand joints and maybe some of the large joints involvement in an inflammatory way. Why do we need to talk about it so importantly now? We have so much new development in treatment of these conditions, but the important fact here is you need to treat early with these whatever the newer drugs or whatever the things that we have, so that patients will not have the deformities which we are all familiar with these diseases. It is very much preventable if you detect them early and treat them properly. So that's why the second part of my topic, as your president emphasized, what the first contact medical person can do to help these patients. So it's well known the treatment with synthetic DMARD should be started as soon as a diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis is made. That's well known and well documented, well evidence based. Similar applies to all the peripheral spondyloarthropathies, including mainly the psoriatic arthritis. Any delay in start of disease modifying treatment in patients with rheumatoid may lead to a worse outcome comparison to early start of treatment. These are evidence-based statements from these different sources. So first, it's important to know what are these phases now we know in development of rheumatoid arthritis. The EULA, the European League Against Rheumatism, recommends these terminologies to be used when we talk about the phases. So it's well known there is some genetic factors and environmental factors probably play in a part. Thing is that we still don't very clearly know what these are, especially in the rheumatoid and psoriatic arthropathies, which will lead to something called systemic autoimmunity happening in our body. So when this systemic autoimmunity causes problems, the patients will develop the symptoms, that is mainly the pain of joints. It is called arthralgia. It's symptoms, but no arthritis. I'll come to you what is the difference between arthralgia and arthritis also for the, just to sake of updating on that. And then they will develop the unclassified arthritis, and which will ultimately end up in the RA or the See whether I can take. Yeah, which will develop the established rheumatoid arthritis. So this is the phases of development that can occur in a patient's or person's system once they who are prone for this. So why this phase is important? As I told you, it's early. Finding early of these patients is important with the present day treatment options. So it's not now we are looking at the established RA. Now we are looking at trying to treat at what we call undifferentiated or unclassified arthritis level. Can I have this? Sorry, okay. Yeah, then yes, the difference between what is arthralgia and arthritis. So arthralgia simply means pain in the joints. But with this pain, if you get joint swellings and pain or stiffness, then it's called arthritis. So you have to establish the synovitis or swelling in joints for you to call it arthritis. But it's important to see this patient with arthralgia itself because just the precedent of developing arthritis in most of these patients. So when it comes to clinical phases, autoimmune inflammatory arthropathies, you will get a healthy person, but having these genetic risks and some environmental exposures with having some systemic autoimmunity boiling in their body, which will lead to the arthralgia, the symptom without arthritis. And then they get early arthritis or undifferentiated arthritis, unclassified as it's called. And then you get the classified arthritis, the rheumatoid or psoriatic arthritis. Mainly we are looking at this level. So what is important was, of course, the healthy people will not know that there's something happening in their body, they will never come. But people with arthralgia and undifferentiated arthritis may come especially to the first contact medical personnel, which are in this country. And so what we are looking at this level, as I told you before, getting the established RA or psoriatic arthritis. So these are commonly in community and then you will be seeing them. So it's important you to detect these and know whom need to be referred. Not all patients with arthralgia, you probably will not need to go into a consultation with a specialist. So in the group which we call arthralgia, they will be explained by other diagnoses, such as the fibromyalgia, very common condition where you have what we call generalized pain syndromes. They never develop arthritis, but they keep on having pains which need to be tackled or diagnosed and treated in different way. And there'll be unexplained things, but very unlikely to be rheumatoid arthritis, looking at factors which I'll talk you later. And then one group will go into as what is now we call clinically suspected arthralgia. They are the one who have features which is likely to develop arthritis later down the line. And this is the group which we need to pick up early so that all of us can get together and treat them early, preventing any deformities occurring in these patients. So what is the definition of clinically suspected arthralgia as the uvula classification says? So these are things you have to look in your patients. If a patient comes to you saying, I am having joint pains. So in the history, look for whether these symptoms are of recent onset. Of course, for their thing, the recent onset is less than 1 year. Many of our patients would come to us very much earlier than that. And symptoms, especially in the MCP joint, metacarpophalangeal joint, is very important for detecting possibly going into the clinically suspect arthralgia. They have a morning stiffness more than 60 minutes, 1 hour. It's very important, something which you have to ask the patient. It's not the pain, the stiffness. So you have to ask when you get up in the morning, whether there's any signal, if you say tadagatiya, what that patient will tell. And that you have to then next thing you have to ask whether that lasts for more than 1 hour, because even osteoarthritis, you get this stiffness, but they will say soon as they start doing some movements, it goes over. That is not a clinically significant symptom in the sense of inflammatory arthropathies, but that's a feature of osteoarthritis. More severe symptoms present in early morning, and there may be first degree relative with the RA. So in the family history also, you have to look in your history when you take the patients. And when you examine, what you will might find is that they have difficulty in making a fist. And when you do the positive squeeze test, the MCP joint at the treatment, they will have pain there. The squeeze test is you hold the patient at the MCP joint and squeeze their finger like this. So when you press slightly, they say there is tenderness or pain. So that's a positive squeeze test. So those are 2 things that you can ask them to do. And if any of these are present, then we have to categorize or possibility of they are having a clinically suspected arthralgia, which need a better or careful follow-up. And any rheumatological condition, what we know well is that is the clinical expertise, which after seeing so many patients and looking at the patients, and pattern recognition is the what make our decisions generally as a rheumatologist. So this pattern recognition will come to you, anybody who wants to see a lot of patients. So that's why they recommend, even for clinically suspect arthralgia, it is the rheumatologist who will be doing the best job by looking at whether they are really having a clinically suspect arthralgia, or you can be explained by something else. So, so the world is, so what they have found is it was suggested that it should be people who can distinguish this is actually by expertise, and only a minority of patients who are presented with arthralgia and subsequently developed RA were not recognized by rheumatologists once they have seen. So it's the experience. So that is why these referrals early to a rheumatologist will be needed. If you find any of those early features, send them across. We should be able to look at them and tell you whether patient needs further follow-up with us because they have clinically suspect arthralgia, or whether you can follow them up. Provided they develop something later, we need to treat. You may need to re-refer. So assessment by rheumatologist is the next step, which is well known, but you have to refer them without starting any steroids or NSAIDs, because once you give that, we are going to mask these clinical features. So as I told you, it's not the testing which we are after. We are looking at the clinical picture for us to diagnose whether the patients are having clinically suspected arthralgia. So if you mask them with this treatment, even for a short period, then we are going to miss it at this early state. And you may use something like paracetamol, analgesics to get them over till they see a consultant. And this country, we are lucky because you can access them very much early, unlike the European countries where they have to maybe wait around 6 months before they see a consultant. So our patients are much more accessible to this type of thing. I think it's ideal for our country to establish this type of rapport and referral system. So what we will be doing is evaluate for further evidence of arthritis or whether they have higher risk of RA. Again, we go through the history and examination properly. And there, of course, we may be doing some inflammatory markers and like the ESR and CRP and autoantibody, rheumatoid factor, and anti-citrullinate peptide antibodies, ACPA. So these are the ones who give specific diagnosis. These are the ones we'll do. You may do this and send the patients because it will be helpful if we have those. But sometimes the positive these tests does not really mean the patient is having inflammation, especially rheumatoid factor positivity does not, because we have about higher number of false positive tests with rheumatoid factor, which can be due to some other things. Even a viral infection sometimes can stimulate a rheumatoid factor. So even though they are positive, don't make the patient feel pretty scared of these things. Tell that, go and find out whether you really need any follow-up. ESR, CRP can go up due to some other things also. So still we look at the overall picture before we make a diagnosis. So, and of course, the newer tools, which will, if available for us, which will tell us very early diagnosis are the ultrasound scan of joints and the MRI scan of those joints. Ultrasound is actually a tool for rheumatologists in most part of the world today. Unfortunately, we don't have that facility yet. So it has to be done in the clinic by a rheumatologist and see, because they have given good evidence. So we are trying to get at least to the government hospitals this facility where the rheumatologists are actually trained in other countries to look at their joints and just to pick up whether they have, because you can't get a radiologist involved because in the sense that takes more time for the patient to come up and down. And but they need special probes and things look into the joint. So what development is happening in other countries is the ultrasound scan has become a tool which help us to pick up early synovitis, and MRI also in extreme conditions might be helpful if you really have doubts. If there is no evidence of arthritis, that we can't find any synovitis or high inflammatory markers, we'll have a close follow-up with can go back to the primary care physician. We'll be sending back to you saying that this patient have no arthritis but have arthralgia risk of RA. Please follow up. Then of course you can use NSAIDs as needed basis and see. If they develop some sort of synovitis or they have persistent problem, you may need to send back for a re-evaluation after some time. And so in this part of it, what the role of first contact medical personnel is to recognize the features of clinically suspect of arthralgia, at risk of RA, what I told you earlier, in the history, joint symptoms, recent onset duration of less than 1 year, symptoms located in the MCP joint especially, duration of early morning stiffness more than 60 minutes, severe symptoms present at the early morning and presence may be a first degree relative having RA, and examination, the fist and the squeeze test. So this is what not important part. Again, what I want to stress is don't give steroids or NSAIDs these patients just for trial. Let us see and then get back to, once we send back, you can treat with them. Again, don't use steroids, use the NSAIDs, but again, when needed. And then moving from arthralgia to arthritis, pain to the swelling as seen in this picture. Again, what we call early undifferentiated arthritis, where we don't have enough criteria to diagnose RA, but definite synovitis is coming. And so it is well established. The clinical examination is the method of choice, detecting arthritis, which may be confirmed by the ultrasonography. So again, still you need to be clinically suspicious to do ultrasound. You don't do ultrasound scan on everybody. And this group will have who will develop definite arthropathy of RA or psoriatic arthritis, or what is sphenical spondyloarthropathy, or some of them just resolve spontaneously, because even we know even rheumatoid arthritis, you can have monophasic. You start, sometimes it just disappears after a few weeks. And there may be another group which will remain undifferentiated, or we need to follow them up carefully. So how do you diagnose early rheumatoid arthritis? Now this is the present 2010 classification criteria. There's 4 domains which you look at it and give you scores. The domains are the joint involvement, number of joint and what type of joints, the serology, the acute phase reactant, and duration of symptoms. So we give different marks for these things. And if you really want to classify, that is, classification is for trials. But we use these domains for a diagnosis purpose as well. But we may not look at the scores, because some of these are there which we clinically think rheumatoid, will treat as rheumatoid arthritis. That's how it goes. So it's different things. We are looking at is mainly look at this. It's if you have a large number of small joints, is get the highest marks. But even 2 to 10, more than 2 or more large joints, it still can be RA. So now even with a 1 joint involvement, still we can classify them RA, because now we are looking at this. So the traditional way of saying that you need symmetrical polyarthritis for 6 weeks, though there is the commonest presentation, we can now with this classification diagnose even before they develop this typical picture. And then we give the marks of the rheumatoid factor and ANP or ACP, also depending on the titer. and ESR and CRP, and the duration less than 6 weeks and more than 6 weeks. So how do we manage people who are not have established these classical criteria to diagnose rheumatoid arthritis, but definitely having inflammatory arthritis with synovitis happening? They, again, now we start treatment even in them with early disease modifying drugs. So that's why it's important for your, that's the emphasis is to send them across early, because we'll be starting, even if we don't have enough thing to say rheumatoid arthritis, if there is synovitis with inflammatory features, we'll be starting them on disease modifying drugs, which have shown to prevent the erosions and prevent the deformities which are used to have in this associated with these patients. And so these are the EULA and recommendation on that, on this. So patient at risk of persistent arthritis should be started on disease modifying as early as possible, ideally within 3 months. That is what we call the window of opportunity. What they feel is if you don't treat it, to start treatment after this, they are, even with your good management and treatment, still down the line, they might develop deformities. That's what they are for. So this is the window of opportunity to get into these patients, to get start treatment. You all need to be very alert and know about this and start referring them early. So window of opportunity is to be 12 weeks is as it's given evidence now. And treatment of choice still is methotrexate. And don't worry about these drugs, as the methotrexate, there's a lot of myths around, making patients pretty scared to take this, but this is the best drug we can give, with probably not bad as what we thought on this drug. NSAIDs are effective in symptom control, but should have a minimal dosage, shortest possible duration while evaluation, and also while the methotrexate start acting. It might take about 4 to 8, 12 weeks before the methotrexate start acting actually. Steroids can be used again as a bridge therapy and not as a long-term treatment, even for these patients. About methotrexate, just few things. The infections are certainly higher in this patient, but now what they have found is actually it may be not methotrexate, it is the RA itself. The rheumatoid patient itself seems to be having more prone for infections rather than whether they are treated with methotrexate or not. So it may be not the drug, so don't blame it on that anytime they get any sort of infection. Explain to the patient, no, it may be your disease, you are prone for that, so don't worry. If you treat the disease properly with these drugs, that you probably have a lesser chance of getting infections in future. And another scare is that they have caused a lot of lung issues, and it is now well established methotrexate does not cause that much of lung issues. It actually can protect the patients getting lung disease if you really treat the rheumatoid arthritis properly with the methotrexate. So one fact that you should know, and let your patients who come with the drugs to you for other treatment and discuss with you about these drugs, make them more confident by telling them these facts. Pneumonitis remains a concern with methotrexate therapy, especially it's probably in the first year. And so that's why we keep on following them up monthly at the beginning, and then maybe about 3 to 4 months every time, testing and looking at them, because of this can happen. Pancytopenias again definitely seem to be higher, but generally with a very high doses of methotrexate rather than the 12.5, 15 generally which we use in our patient. Very rarely we get into this trouble, but that's why we again do the full blood count every month after starting. After about maybe once things are settled down, probably every 3 to 4 months is the recommendation. Something which COVID told us now is probably we don't need to worry even that much, probably every 6 months or so, because we are now getting patients who have been on treatment without seeing anybody coming back without any problem. So even the other countries, that's what the worldwide people are thinking, whether these guidelines of doing it every 3 months can be deferred in some of the patients. Right? So COVID has told us something good things about how to follow up also in this context. Transaminases goes up, the liver functions in about 22%, but hardly only about 1% having it more than twice the normal. So we are not very much worried, just a slightly higher level. Less than twice the normal, we just continue the same doses and follow up. People who are more than that, generally, we might stop it. But commonly after 1 month or 2 months, it's come back to normal. And when we restart, nothing happens. So they are transient problems at the beginning, but we look at them, and only if it sort of keep on happening that we withdraw the methotrexate and go to something else. So again, the liver issues, unless they already have a severe liver disease due to maybe even severe fatty liver, it's not minor fatty liver with slight increases. Even gastroenterologists say you continue with your methotrexate, you don't worry. So make sure that you know that, and because the fatty liver is also becoming a bit of a very common issue among our communities now, probably with our food habit and things. So we are having some concern, but discussing with gastroenterologists, they think we can continue unless it goes beyond more than 2, mainly if it really go beyond the 3 times the normal value. So there are patients who on fatty liver having slightly, we just continue and we are not found any problems with that. So here what we want you all to be comfortable with and know and help our patient to comply with our treatment, because the important thing about rheumatoid or inflammatory arthropathy treatment is compliance. They need to be on this drug, they need to continue, they can't break it. Otherwise, the effects of these drugs are not there. They will end up with deformities. So make them, encourage them to keep on taking it. Especially even after they get better, they have to continue. That is the other message that you have to give. Most people will say, okay, I got better, I'm going to stop this. So please encourage them to keep on taking it if you find these patients coming to you with this problem, or maybe with some other problem. In your history, you find this, encourage them to take, educate what happens if they don't treat now, and also encourage them to be compliant with the investigations as we tell them, because sometimes we find patients are very, soon as they get to the 1 year of treatment and they are very comfortable, they just forget to do the investigations also, even though they take it. And if they are having some breakthrough symptoms, make sure they come and see us again early. That's the way that we can help them to be continue and control this disease to prevent getting them the deformities. And also I told you, talk about to them and advise them on the adverse effects, and also not to be misled, especially pharmacies, when they go to pharmacies to get these drugs. Your cancer එකක් තියනවාද? methotrexate ගන්න. That's the end of the story of the patient. They will not come take that. So they might come to you and tell, okay, pharmacist told me this. Make sure, tell them it is not a main cancer drug. It is the best drug that they can have. That's the main problem we are again facing with some pharmacies when we put them on methotrexate. So make sure that you keep them educating and help us to manage. Coming to next part of it, the axial spondyloarthropathy. Here, you know, we call it axial spondyloarthropathy. And the spondyloarthritis, if you take, has a big spectrum of diseases. The main axial one, what we call, you know, ankylosing spondylitis. Then the psoriatic arthritis, the next common, with axial plus peripheral. Then we have a lot of peripheral ones with the reactive arthritis, enteropathic arthritis associated with Crohn's and the ulcerative colitis, as well as maybe Whipple's and other enteropathies. The eye people itself get involved with the anterior uveitis, maybe even sometimes they have only the uveitis, and now the ophthalmology also started treating them with methotrexate and biologicals, even when they only, anterior uveitis, and of course the children can also get it. So the spondyloarthropathy is a big group, and so you will find different type of clinical presentations. The important thing is Schober's test we do to detect whether the spine is involved. They can get GI problems, the eye uveitis, the skin, the psoriatic skin rashes. The classical picture of the dactylitis is this, where you find that sausage shape toes and or fingers, like this one. Dactylitis, classical picture of spondyloarthropathy. effusions, especially in the large joints, the enthesitis, and that is Achilles tendinitis, plantar fasciitis are common, maybe sometimes the tennis elbow and golfer's elbow. So these are the classical features you might pick up. I just emphasize because these are sometimes even patient with arthralgia or back pain coming with this, it should click in your mind, okay, this patient is going to get the full bone spondyloarthropathy. So these are things you should, if you detect something like this, always ask whether they have joint problems and then get it referred. So important point here with the axial spondyloarthropathy is picking up the inflammatory back pains early. Because again, the early treatment is what we can prevent what we knew as the bamboo spine happening. That can be prevented now with the newer treatment. And but you need to pick up early. Start seeing X-ray with bamboo spine and send in. Then no point that we will not be able to help much. We will only give pain relief is the only thing we can do. So how do you pick up an inflammatory back pain? The criteria given by the ankylosing spondylitis, so Association for Ankylosing Spondylitis, is that age below 40, now it's actually changed to 45. Any back pain starting in a younger person below 45, onset will be before 40. So 50-year-old coming and saying I had pain for 6 years, yes, it should ring an alarm in yourself, saying, okay, I had to look whether it's inflammatory back pain. Generally, they are very insidious onset, not acute onset like a mechanical or sudden onset, the mechanical pains. They improve with exercises, while the mechanical ones get worse with exercises. And there's no improvement with rest, which get better if it's a mechanical one. And pain at night is also indication which says that it will be an inflammatory condition. So just ask these few questions from your patient whenever, especially younger person, come with a back pain. Don't attribute it to his work or sitting and computer and things. Always look for these. If you find any of these, it should click in a mind, this is could be inflammatory and need further assessment. So coming to how you diagnose axial spondyloarthropathy is we look, there's two arms. One is imaging arm, one is the clinical arm. The imaging arm, you see sacroiliitis in your x-rays with the features, what I told you earlier also, what we call SPA features down here. And then the other one is we don't look at the x-ray, or x-ray can be normal, but if you do the HLA-B27, that is positive. And with that, if you have two or more features, that you can classify them as a axial spondyloarthropathy. So features are having this inflammatory back pain, which recognized by the features earlier, having definite arthritis, enthesitis, dactylitis, uveitis, psoriasis, Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, where this back pain respond very quickly to NSAIDs. Family is just SPA, HLA-B27 positive as it's previously, and elevated CRP. Remember, ESR and CRP may not elevate about 50% of the axial spondyloarthropathy patients. So don't depend on ESR and CRP, especially here. Unlike the rheumatoid and psoriasis, probably about 90% will have high ESR, CRP, right? But here only about 50% may be high. So we have a lot of patients with spondyloarthropathy, normal ESR. So just doing the ESR normal and not referring is not good. Look for the clinical features. Now we differentiate the axial spondyloarthropathies into two groups, axial spondyloarthropathy and peripheral spondyloarthropathy, rather than going by the diseases which we described earlier, the ankyspond and the psoriatic type, because then it's to treat. The axial spondyloarthropathies we treat in one way, and peripheral spondyloarthropathy we treat as almost as rheumatoid arthritis, right? The axial spondyloarthropathy, we again, for your knowledge, can be non-radiographic. That is, there's no X-ray changes in the sacroiliac joint, and radiographic, where you have the radiographic or X-ray changes. People who have no X-ray changes, you may need to do an MRI, and if that is positive, they go as actually non-radiographic spondyloarthropathy. Though we think MRI is but the MRI is a radiographic thing, but in this classification, X-ray normal, MRI positive goes as non-radiographic, or X-ray normal, HLA-B27 positive with two or more those features. So X-ray is, there's a classification of X-ray, the different changes, just to for your knowledge, that you start with a, actually start with a sort of widening of the SI joint, and then you start irregularity in the SI joint, either side of the SI joint, that you might see sclerosis with irregularity, and then it start fusing and end up with ankylosed one. So if you have sort of second and third stage or fourth stage, you take it as a positive radiographic axial spondyloarthropathy. Spine, lumbar spine also, you might get this early changes, what is called Romanos sign, where there were small erosions here. And then you'd start developing the syndesmophytes. Spophytes. Of course, this is the late stage, which we call bamboo spine. So picking up this stage is what is needed. And MRI is a good choice, where it will show early inflammatory features with the edema, bone edema, and irregularities and develop changes in the SI joints. So your role will be recognizing the inflammatory back pain by clinical sense and know what are the familiar common spondyloarthropathy features. So you pick up them in the whole over the body and get them referred. I will not advise you to go straight away for MRI because it's costly to the patient. But if you are doing it, another common mistakes done for the back pain, because you are not pick up the inflammatory features, doing a normal back MRI, which is not going to pick up the spondyloarthropathy features. You have to request for a stir view or what we call fat suppression views, then only that we'll see. Otherwise, what the radiographer is going to do is normal back pain protocol, which only do T1, T2, which may not show any changes of the ankylosing spondylitis in the patients. So that's why, again, it's clinically you have to look for infant back pain. If there's inflammatory features, if you are doing MRI, always you have to specify and say we need the stir views or fat suppression views. Otherwise, because even before the radiologist sees it, it's the radiographer who sees this, and they just do the back pain protocol, which is going to miss it. And how we treat, the last part of my lecture is on just a background on what is we call disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs. We treat both mainly the peripheral arthropathies with disease-modifying drugs, and we have some role to play in axial spondyloarthropathy. When we come to know, now we call them the conventional synthetic disease-modifying drugs, biological disease-modifying drugs, and targeted synthetic disease-modifying drugs. So there are three groups of disease-modifying drugs. The conventional is what we know already, the methotrexate, sulfasalazine, leflunomide, and hydroxychloroquine are the common ones. Then we have this biological disease-modifying drugs made by biotechnology using generally this bacteria and things. And we produce proteins which are going to inhibit the immune system. And so they act very specific and targeted activity on a specific part of the immune system, suppressing the inflammation. That's how this biological works. And importantly, they are made by biotechnology rather than the normal synthetic pharmaceutical development. There are varieties, what we call, when the first drugs to be developed are called originators. Now people are developing, once the patent goes off, same things are being developed by other companies, and they are called biosimilars. But a biosimilar should have a phase 3 clinical study comparing with the originator and show that they are equal. Only that we can call it biosimilar, and a whole host of other people are developing things which without these clinical trials of phase 3, and they are called biomimics. So whether they are as effective as the originator, we don't know. Hence, generally we don't recommend biomimics. We recommend biosimilars and or the originators as for the treatment. Sometimes the biosimilars can be less costly than the originator. That's the advantage. And now we have what we call targeted synthetic drugs. They are synthetic pharmacological tablets, but they are also very specific, targeted treatment on the inflammatory pathway, and only one. So they are called the synthetic small molecules. acting on the intracellular transudate pathways. And just for the names, the conventional I told you earlier, the targeted ones which we have is this country we have tofacitinib, which is what we call JAK inhibitor, Janus kinase inhibitor, which is a pathway which brings the signal from the cell surface into the nucleus to produce proteins. So when you block that, even the information is occurring outside, the T cells or macrophages will not be producing these cytokines which act or inflammatory pathways which act on this joint. So their information goes down. So that's how these targeted synthetic drugs act. So what we have in this country is tofacitinib. And then we have different type of biologicals, the TNF alpha inhibitors, B cell inhibitors, the rituximab, then what is called T cell co-stimulating inhibitors, interleukin 6, and that is mainly for the rheumatoid arthritis. And when it comes to the spondyloarthropathy, we have interleukin 17 inhibitors and 12-23 inhibitors. So these are just a diagrammatic way of showing that how these act in this inflammatory pathway, just for the have some interest. The conventional disease modifying are not very specific. They act on T cells, B cells, and macrophages in different pathways and control their activities, while the abatacept is what is here the co-stimulator factor, which is the antigen presenting cell will act on the T cell, where you have to antigen presenting cell should act with the T helper cells to produce all this inflammatory pathway. It blocked here, and the rituximab act on the B cells, and then the tocilizumab will on interleukin 6, and there are a whole of anti-TNF inhibitors, which TNF also is one of the cytokine which is cause the tissue destruction or joint destruction in disease, and targeted cells are here, mainly JAK inhibitors. And when it comes to spondyloarthropathy, we have whole host of again drugs which can act on this immune pathway. And spondyloarthropathy, the axial spondyloarthropathy, the conventional disease modifying drugs don't have much of a place. It is the NSAIDs and then followed by the biologicals. So biologics become more important in spondyloarthropathy. And we have TNF alpha, 12-23 mainly with the psoriasis. Skin is mainly more than arthritis. Then the JAK and PDF4 inhibitors again in more psoriasis and peripheral arthropathies. Interleukin 17 is what probably the latest we have in this country, the secukinumab. And they have a major role because it's actually interleukin 17 is found to be on different levels of the inflammatory pathway cells, dendritic cells, T cells, which Th17 and targeted cell all will produce sometimes interleukin 17. So inhibiting them will control the spondyloarthropathy in most of these patients. So just these drugs I told you about, just to update the new medications, to be aware that these patients will come and tell you they are on this, just to know. And little bit about the adverse effects probably you have to know, because they might, what the biologicals have done is that it can actually inhibit the inflammatory pathway so that you can have increased number of serious infections, or if they get an infection, they can have severe problems. Especially bacterial, fungal, and viral, depending on drugs. Like the rituximab is B cell inhibitor, so they can have a worsening of the viral infections more than a normal person. While the TNF alpha blockers and interleukin 6 blockers can have worsening of the bacterial infection if they get one. They are not more prone for that, but they can have serious effects of this disease. So you have to be little careful when they get. You may need to treat early, or you need, if these patients are on their biologicals, better for you to refer to a physician to say that this on biologicals, they are getting these symptoms of a bacterial or viral infection. Would you please see and see whether they need early, probably higher effective antibiotics. Problem is this biologicals again is this reactivation of TBs can happen. So generally we screen for TB, even if it's latent TB where they don't have chest symptoms or sputum negative, but MAN2 is positive, we generally give them INH for 6 months and treat with that, and while starting the biologicals. So, but still we sometimes get reactivation. So anybody on biologicals coming with some features of TB, you have to be alert and make sure that whether it's a TB, and other ones are hepatitis B and C and herpes zoster can get reactivated, or get worse when you treat with the biological. Just to be aware of this, because sometimes these patients with biologicals might come to you different other infections, and then you have to be alert that they need better attention than a normal infection. So in conclusion, what I want to say is, see whether you can get this patient at arthralgia state and refer, or at least in the early arthritis stage. So we would like to have the X-rays like this, either normal or with this, just the what we call the periarticular osteopenia stage. That is the earliest stage change that you see in the X-rays without getting any erosions, and not at this stage with deformities and severe erosions. Very little we may able to do. And in spine, again, these early stages of sacroiliitis or lumbar involvement rather than this state of bamboo spine. We can prevent them with this NIMA treatment options which are happen there if you see early. So in conclusion, President Sir and ladies and gentlemen, what is needed is high index of suspicion of detecting clinically suspected arthralgia, early arthritis in inflammatory back pain, refer early for a rheumatology assessment, encourage these patients when they come to you for the compliance of treatment, and be ready to pick up adverse effects early. So thank you very much for your kind attention, and thank you again for the invitation. And I'm happy to discuss any questions if you have any.
Thank you, sir, for that very interesting, clear, and logical presentation of a very difficult subject, as all of us know. It's open for Q&A session.
Stage of arthralgia, if the anti-CCP is positive, do you start them with methotrexate?
We will assess and see whether there are the combination of inflammatory features are there. That's why it's important. So that's why I said even rheumatoid factor positive, anti-CCP positive, just without any of the features of inflammation, we'll watch. We don't want to rush into that just because the test is positive. But if they have a whole host of all the features like the early morning symptoms, stiffness, everything is there. Even if we don't have the feeling of the synovitis, yes, we'll start. We'll start methotrexate.
The other thing is when they take methotrexate, how can they become pregnant, or how long have they got to stop MTX for them to
Yes,
become pregnant?
good question. Yes, females, because now all these arthralgia in young, common in young females. So that's a major issue that we have. So methotrexate, now they say you stop 1 month. Actually, you can, after 1 month, they can stop their contraceptive. So anybody, young patient on methotrexate, if they are married, we tell them, please start on a contraceptive pill. Give us time till we control the arthritis. Maybe need about 6 months to 1 year, depending on the age. Also, if they come at 30s, we'll say, okay, no, we can't wait for probably 6 months control. Probably we can go to sulfasalazine if they have active disease and ask them to stop the contraceptive and go for a pregnancy. But we tell, if we want better to have methotrexate, the best drug, we control it and then think about the second options. During that time, they need good contraceptive. Best will be the oral contraceptive. If they are no pregnant, they are nulliparous. They have children already, maybe IUCD be better because the compliance will be better. But once we stop methotrexate, after 1 month, they can be off their contraceptives and go ahead. Recommendation is 3 months also in some countries. So 1 to 3 months, maybe be safer. 3 months is the maximum you need to be without methotrexate before going to pregnancy. The other question is the paternity. The father, male person is on methotrexate. Earlier, we used to stop that also 3 months before. Now they say that latest, the British guidelines say there's no issue with the father. So they can continue to take the methotrexate while looking for a pregnancy.
When you take methotrexate during an infection like viral infection, do we advise the patient to stop it or?
No. Unless they have a severe infection, you don't need to stop. Just any viral infection, even a pneumonia thing which is not very severe, you just continue because the benefits are better. Because if they start flaring up, that will make things worse. But of course, they have severe infection, severe sepsis. Of course, we might stop. But the benefit of stopping is probably minimal if you think it logically, because methotrexate is something collect in the body, methotrexate or any of these modified drugs collects in the body and act. So even if you stop, the action is there for about another 3 months. So, but of course, being safer side, if they have very severe infection, we ask them, we stop. Otherwise, you don't really need to stop.
One last question is,
Yes, sir.
does methotrexate affects renal? Have you got to check serum creatinine because you didn't mention it?
No. Generally, unless they have other reason to have renal issues, we don't generally check because the effect of methotrexate on kidney is minimal. It's mainly the liver. But of course, the methotrexate is excreted from kidney. So if you have a renal issue, your need of methotrexate dosage has to be less. So if they have a renal issue, like if the diabetic, yes, we'll keep looking at the creatinine because unknowingly it might go up, then we have to bring it down because they can have higher side effects. If you have stage 3 or 4 renal disease, then we may not give methotrexate because then it accumulates in the body because it does not excrete. But the direct side effects are on the bone marrow and the liver. That's all, or as well as the GI tract, the common nausea and vomiting things. So kidney is not affected by the methotrexate, but kidney disease might affect the methotrexate excretion, thereby causing the other side effects more. That's why we generally don't look at the creatinine regularly in these patients.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. Good.
So in one of your slides, you mentioned that the signs of arthritis, the pain and stiffness and the swelling. How about the loss of movement?
That will be there, but then
Is it a sine qua non? Or I mean, for you to diagnose arthritis now, exactly when there is synovitis particularly,
yeah,
how would it is
No.
extremely difficult for us to find out sometimes when the patient complains of the pain and the swelling is there, whether the arthritis is present or not.
no, if the swelling is there, then it is arthritis.
But can it be due to effusion without there being any, say, traumatic effusion?
Yeah, it can. No, when you say arthritis, is what I'm talking about. The arthritis is not all arthritis are rheumatoid. So arthritis is defined as swelling in a joint associated with pain and stiffness. So loss of function is a part of the inflammatory response. We know the inflammation when there are 4 things, that is that red, tender, swelling, and loss of function. So that will ultimately come. So that's why when you say earliest thing that you can't make a fist, it's actually loss of function. So something like that is an early feature of it. But then those patients, we have to see whether there's definitely the difficulty in movement is really due to the inflammation, not. But if you have that with other features, yes, we'll say it's synovitis. So we can take it, it's sort of a combination of things we have to go. But if you say really the definition of arthritis, they don't talk about the loss of function because actually might come little later than what you get the swelling. The early swelling, if you can detect, probably at that time they may not have a full loss of function. So it will be there. So that is something which by the time you have loss of function, there will definitely be some swelling. So that's why we don't talk there much about loss of function at that level, because loss of function comes generally with the swelling.
So another small clinical question. In the case of arthralgias, you were mentioning about the fibromyalgia as one of the common
Yes.
causes. What is your experience about myofascial pain syndrome? Do
That-
you believe in that, or it is just?
I think it's part of the parcel of the fibromyalgia, like it's, isn't it? That because those are trigger points.
Diagnostic criteria differ. No, in the case of fibromyalgia, you get the tender points.
Yeah. This is,
Whereas in myofascial, it is mostly at the muscle where you get the trigger points, other than at the joints. So
yeah, no, now in the fibromyalgia, it's not the joints, we look at the trigger points, the tender points that they are mainly on the actual muscle. So it's not arthritis which called the fibromyalgia. So I think it's all these are sort of a same sort of a group of spectrum of the problem. Like what now they call it a generalized pain syndromes. So even this fibromyalgia is going out, now we call it generalized pain syndrome. So all this will come into where you have no arthritis, but they have mainly the pain without much of a inflammatory features. So even myofascial, it's a localized tender points. I mean, trigger points are there. So ultimately they will accumulate and go on when you have different places generalized. then you might get this 14 points out of that 7 will be positive. So in my opinion, they are within the same spectrum of now what we call generalized pain syndrome. So management wise, it's still probably same with a lot of the activity control, patient's mindset, all that plays. We don't know what really is fibromyalgia still. So it's, you need a combination of things other than probably the NSH. So main issue is not to treat just for the pain, but look at the overall picture and try to correct things with them, with the physical activities and things like that should be the main issue there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that very interesting presentation. As a token of appreciation and to certify the fact that you have been a resource person for us, we just awarded a certificate. I now invite for the vote of thanks, please.
Thank you, sir, for that informative speech. I, on behalf of Novartis Sri Lanka, extend my gratitude for embracing this event together. We truly appreciate your presence and sparing the time with us today. I wish to express my gratitude to Dr. Duminda Munidasa for delivering an interesting speech about autoimmune inflammatory arthropathies. I also would like to thank Dr. Ananda Pereira, President of IMPA, and also Dr. AHA Hazari, Medical Update Coordinator at IMPA, for their continuous coordination to make this event a successful. My sincere appreciation goes to all the IMPA doctors present here today. With that, I would like to thank all of you. Please join for dinner at the Veranda main restaurants downstairs. Thank you very much and good night.